My name's Diana, and I'm a grateful, recovering compulsive eater. I weigh and measure 3 meals a day off the grey sheet, commit them to my loving and very patient sponsor, and do not eat anything in between, no matter what. Abstinence and my relationship with my higher power is the most important thing. My abstinent date is the 18th of November 2020, and today is my 179th day abstinent and grateful. Thank you. I was supposed to do this share last month, and I wrote out some points last month, and I revisited them, and I think I could have rewritten the whole thing in a completely different way, but I'm going to just do it the way it comes to me. Today I also did my 4th and 5th steps, so it's quite a mighty day, so I'm quite reflective, which is not a bad thing. I've listened to a couple of qualifications, and I've given it a lot of thought. And in so many ways, I don't relate to some of the stories that I've heard. I haven't heard that many, but there are certain things that I don't relate to myself. And I'll explain some of the aspects that I haven't been able to relate to. I've always eaten healthily. I've never had a problem with too much fast foods or junk foods or anything like that. I've always had 3 meals a day, which is something that, you know, we sit down to meals, and we always sit at a table and that kind of stuff. I don't binge eat. I am not a lonely person. I don't think I've ever really been lonely my whole life. I sometimes wish I could be left alone, but I'm not lonely. I've never purged. I've never felt isolated. I don't think I've hated myself. I haven't comfort eaten. And I've never swallowed pain instead of speaking out, which are some of the things that I've heard other people talk about. And I thought, is there something wrong with me? Am I that special? Am I not on the same program? And then I dug deep, and I started to think about how I got to where I am. And one of the clearest memories I've ever had as a small child is having a very clear sense of destiny, which has been a wonderful thing, but it's also been quite a hard thing. And what I have always thought of is that I have been born into my family of choice to change hereditary patterns, ancestral patterns, generic patterns that have gone back, of abuse, that have gone back at least 3 generations, if not longer. And that's been a huge responsibility, but I've seen very clearly that my role has always been to stop what has been going on in my family for the longest time. And I think that sort of overarches a lot of where I come from. A lot of my life has been about trauma and loss and emotional abuse. And that I think we can all relate to. So here comes I'm not unlike any of you. I'm very, very similar. I had a very, very difficult relationship with my mother. I'm an only child, and my mother was completely self-absorbed, very beautiful, completely idle, pretended she was stupid, and thought that men would cure everything in her life. As long as she had a rich husband and she kept him happy, everything else would take care of itself. So she was completely useless. She didn't cook, she didn't clean, or she literally did nothing all day except moan and groan and make mischief.
That's 5 minutes.
Thank you. And I grew up with a mother who was completely unavailable to me, no matter what I did, whether I was good or bad or naughty or achieved or didn't achieve or acted out or became aggressive. I could not get my mother's attention. She was not available for me. And it has taken me the very longest time to work out that the problem wasn't mine, it was hers. And that it's not that I am unlovable, it's that she was capable of showing me love. And that's been something that I've had to work on a lot. But in the process, I have suffered hugely from being so unable to connect with someone as close as one's mother. My biological father died when I was 2.5. And it wreaked chaos in my mother's already fragile mental health. And I always knew there was something wrong with my mother, but it was never talked about. But I always felt that there was something wrong with my mother, that she wasn't like other mothers. And I prayed that I could have another mother. And when my father died, my mother rejected my half brother and my half sister from his first marriage, and the family was split. And I stayed with my mother, and all I prayed was to actually be with the rest of my family. No one ever consulted us as to what we wanted and what would work best for us. And it was all about my mother and her terrible loss, and nothing to do with the 3 children who had lost their family, lost their father. And I had to stay with a very, very emotionally difficult and self-absorbed, beautiful woman who was almost in competition. Well, I felt that I could never be in competition with her because she would hate me even more. She used to tell me that I would never have a boyfriend because my hands were so ugly. She used to tell me that I would never have a husband because I was too ugly. She would say that you can always replace a child, but you can't replace a husband. And I was a little dyslexic girl who went to school far too young, who didn't know how to tell the time, who couldn't organize herself, who was quiet and withdrawn, and then became extremely angry as a slightly older child and started acting out hugely because of the rage that I had within me. My mother started putting me on diets from when I was very small. Food was always measured, and I always had different lunch boxes. I always had different food from the rest of my family, and there was never enough food. There was never enough love or warmth or food in my house. So my very deep basic needs were never met. I never felt safe. I never, ever felt safe because I had a mother who was all over the place and not available. And she paid attention to everyone but me, and I was blamed for absolutely everything. So I grew up thinking that I must be to blame, but in one way, knowing that I wasn't, and I didn't have anyone to actually say to me, you know what, this is not you. This is not about you. There were no child psychologists. There was no one there to actually make sense to this, except my mother remarried when I was 6, and I had the most wonderful, thank you, wonderful stepfather who was as good as my mother was bad. And he was my angel. He was my absolute angel. And he provided me with the love and care and friendship that I so needed in my life. And it also set up a problem because my mother hated him. And so I had to play this awful game, and she was jealous, and it was a mess. It really was a mess. I was quite an overweight child at school. I was teased at school. When I got to high school, I became a complete rebel. I was the naughtiest child in the school. I took drugs. I was promiscuous. I would act out, but I was also very smart at school. So the teachers didn't know what to do with me. They absolutely did not know, but not one of them ever said, darling, what's wrong? You know, like, what is going on? I had a wonderful grandfather who was besotted over me when I was young, and then completely rejected me when I was a teenager. He used to give me sweets and chocolates. I was never allowed to have those things in the house. My mother used to eat them. Everyone else could eat these things, but I wasn't. I always had to have diet food and all this kind of stuff. I had an abusive relationship with a much older man when I was still at school and went to live with him. He beat me. He sexually assaulted me. He was an alcoholic. He was absolutely mind-bogglingly sick. And my mother knew that I was suffering this abuse, and she couldn't care. She went off to spend time with her lovers. So I was very angry. I was extremely angry. I went to university. I overachieved in amongst all my acting out. I got 3 degrees by the time I was 21 to try and prove that I was worth something. And it didn't work. I never believed it. I then met my husband when I was 19, and he came from a catering background, and I fell in love with his fridge. And I used to just sit in front of his fridge and eat and eat and eat, because I'd never seen such beautiful food before. And they didn't even like food, and exotic, beautiful food. And there was no anxiety around, serving it, or it was just like their way of life. Whereas my mother was very uptight about food, and if I went and took something out of the fridge, she'd come and call me and say, why are you eating this food? My mother-in-law paid for me to go on diet programs as well to lose weight. I've lost a huge amount of weight, but I've always put it on, plus a whole bunch more. When I fell pregnant with my first child, I put on weight, and with my second one as well. But I was so fat that no one even really knew that I was pregnant. My mother committed suicide when I was 29. My husband was a drug addict for many, many years, and I had to hold it all together, which has always been my theme of my life. I've always had to provide. I've always been the person who makes things better, makes things happen, and I have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility, and I can't look after myself. It's taken the longest time for me to look after myself. This program was brought to me by my dear friend who is chairing this meeting, and I was at a point where I was quietly desperate. I was almost resigned to the fact of having a more and more uncomfortable life the older I got. I have hernias, I have bad hips, I have bad ankles, I have a sore back. Everything is giving in. And reflux, all sorts of stuff. And I am so pleased that I was able to embrace this program completely and utterly, find the right sponsor, find the right help, that I can put food in perspective, and I can be calm and peaceful for the first time, because sugar was making me mad. It was making me hyperactive. I was using food to give me energy in order to cope, to work harder. No one works as hard as I do. I can work anyone under the table, but I was pushing myself and not looking after myself. And I can think clearly, and I'm becoming peaceful, and I'm not aggressive, and I'm enjoying food. I'm not thinking about food. I'm not stressing about food, because it's already taken care of. There's such a freedom. My mood is more stable. My husband wanted me to say I don't snore as much, which he's very happy about as well. I'm getting new clothes. I'm starting to sponsor someone, and I just see how this works. And it is so nurturing, self-nurturing. of something. I mean, I've never known how to look after myself. I've never known how to even feed myself. So it's just been the most amazing, amazing process. And I thank you all for your service and your friendship and what we do for each other. I'm very grateful, no matter what.